Logan, we're going to do the countdown.
All right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. I'm going to call the Kaneohe County Health and Human Services Committee to order. Thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to the presentations today about community corrections. But before we do that, we have a little household work to take care of. We had minutes included in your packet. I would look for approval of the minutes from the May 4th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Nissen moves.
Second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We also have the bills to pay. I would,
I so move.
Commissioner Berg
warrants
moves on the warrants. Do I
I'll
hear a
second
second?
it.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we have a couple of warrants. You also have those in front of you or sent them, they were sent to you. A couple of warrants to cancel.
I'll move cancellation of the warrants.
Motion made to move or to cancel the warrants. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Nissen seconds. So any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Tammy Jo,
Good morning.
floor is yours.
Okay. I'm Tammy Jo Lieberg, Kaneohe Community Corrections Director for Community Services. I'm kind of excited that we're actually getting a little bit back more towards normal and doing things like we used to. So today I'm going to briefly talk about our statistics for our first quarter of 2021, and then I have 2 small business matters, and then I'm excited to bring some of my staff forward and have them start talking about their programs and things that they're doing in our office. So over the next few months, I'm hoping to get back on track and bringing more staff in to talk to you about what happens in our department and the different things that we have going on. So next, in 2 weeks, when we come back, I actually am very excited that we're going to actually have one of our probationers is going to come talk about her experiences while she was on probation. And it's one of our success stories we get to hear about in person, so it'll be kind of exciting. So my 2 small business meetings issues is the Drug Free Coalition has granted Kaneohe Community Corrections bus passes and tokens. So as part of a grant, they're going to donate $500 that'll help alleviate transportation costs for our individuals on probation and supervised release over the next year. So I just wanted to let you know that as part of that's a donation coming into my department to help them attend chemical dependency treatment, come into individual counseling sessions, sober support meetings, or into their probation meetings. So we're kind of excited about that process. The other thing I wanted to just mention is I'm also signing a contract. It's an annual contract that we have with the Department of Corrections. We've had for many, many years supporting our STS program. It's a small amount for our community work service program. In fiscal year, it'll be $22,000. In fiscal year 22, it'll be $22,389 funding from the state, and then in 23, a slight increase of $24,184. So just keep that on the agenda. So then next step is I have 3 of my staff that are going to talk about our pretrial supervision unit. The different components of this unit really come back to pretrial supervision, pre-sentence investigations, and our intake and assessment unit. As part of that, we always have evidence-based practices in all of our supervision practices from each of our units. So we're going to start our presentations today with Krystal Roloffs. She's going to talk about just an overview of evidence-based practices. Then Allison Deal is going to talk about pre-sentence investigations. And then Jason Denton is going to talk about pretrial supervision and our bail studies. So we'll have Krystal come up first and start that presentation. This should be good.
Good
Welcome,
morning.
Krystal.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's nice to see everybody in person. I appreciate being here today. Thank you. Today I'm going to talk.
Excuse me, Crystal, would you, for those that might be watching, would you state your name and the department and what you're representing?
Krystal Roloffs. I'm a probation officer with Kansas County Community Corrections.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Today I'm going to talk to you about evidence-based practices. It's really an interesting concept. I think you've maybe heard it through many different areas of your life, but today in evidence-based practices is kind of our why, or why we do what we do in corrections. Let's see here.
Should be.
So just a couple core facts to put into it. All correctional programs, that could be prison, it could be any probation, it could be anything. All correctional programs generally reduce recidivism by 10%. So that's doing nothing, just flat out having a program and people in it. If we want to step up reducing recidivism, we add cog behavioral technologies or cog behavioral programming. We can reduce recidivism by 25 to 30%. And then you get the biggest bang for your buck right there. We incorporate interpersonal skills training, behavioral interventions, the cog skills, and mentoring, and we bump that all the way up to 40%. So that is our why. We want to reduce recidivism. We want to integrate people back into the community. That's our why. And then how do we get the best bang for our buck? And you'll kind of keep hearing that because it is a bang for your buck, right? So in order to look at what makes recidivism high, the studies have shown that if we focus on the wrong issues, we actually can make things worse, right? If we give too much attention to low-risk offenders and not focus our resources on the medium to high-risk offenders, we actually can make low-risk offenders recidivate, which we don't want to do. That's counterproductive, right? And then another one would be that if programs don't apply the research or knowledges to the practice applied with fidelity. So if a program is made and it's not done according to how it's meant to be made, it doesn't have an effect, right? So we have to stick to exactly what is it meant for and the reasons why we're doing it. And then another piece would be that the system is not in alignment. Are your sentencing practices following the crime? Is the supervision following the person? How do we make that all work so that it actually has an impact instead of making things worse? So what does work? We need to target criminogenic risk and need, and we'll talk a lot about that because that is part of our why. Getting involved with COG, getting those interventions in there, incorporating social learning practices. How can we be pro-social models to the people that we supervise? Creating a balanced, integrated approach with sanctions and interventions. When do you need to use the hammer and when sometimes do you need to just walk them through it? How do you balance all of that? Incorporating the principle of responsivity. So responsivity factors are going to be more like mental health, homeless, victim issues. How do we incorporate that against the criminogenic needs? And then obviously operating our programs with integrity and fidelity. How do we operate according to how that they're meant to be made? And then how do we keep that quality assurance in there? So the next part is the risk need responsivity principle. You're going to hear RNR a lot in the criminal justice world. So the risk principle is how do we match the level of services to the caseloads that we have. So Tammy will bring up some stats here. We're going to supervise in a year roughly 12 to 1,300 offenders. We have 20 probation officers. How do we focus where we put our resources, right? Because if we put them towards the low people, we make them worse. We want to focus those resources towards our medium and our high. So we have a number.
May I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
That was a question I wrote down. Can you explain how giving too much attention to a low-risk person actually increase? Do they just get pissed off with all the attention that you're giving them and react that way?
No, it's more along the lines of if you're a first-time DWI offender and you come in and I say, okay, you're going to go to treatment and you're going to do this and you're going to do that and we're going to throw the whole gamut at you, you start to believe that you're worse than you actually are, right?
Oh, so that's the attention you're talking about, not necessarily I'm calling you too much or I'm emailing you. I got it. Okay.
Right. And our low-risk offenders actually have contact with our agents every 3 months. And so we try to keep that in balance. Now, if somebody starts going off the deep end and spiraling, we can increase that, we can reassess them, but we kind of try to target that intervention accordingly.
Thanks for that explanation.
Yeah, no problem. So the risk principle is going to be where we match the services according to their risk. Every client that comes through has a Wisconsin or a pre-screen, which kind of gives us a direction. And then we also follow up with an LSCMI, which is a level of service case management inventory for adults, or a YLS, which would be the youth version of it. And so our target populations on supervision are going to be our felonies, our gross misdemeanor, and our misdemeanor person offenses, and then anybody that scores high on that pre-screen. So we kind of already have a funnel there, right? And then as we go through those risk assessments, that helps us target our the need principles. So the needs that are targeted are criminogenic needs. Those are the needs that have been found to reduce recidivism the most. And that's going to be criminal history, education and employment, leisure and recreation, family and marital, companions, alcohol and drug problems, pro-social attitudes and orientations, and pro-social or antisocial patterns of behavior. So that's the focus group right there. Those are the things that we can focus on to reduce recidivism. That taken into account, we also need to have responsivity, because anybody knows, or a lot of people, or you could guess, if someone has a lot of mental health issues, that's going to affect how they can work with their criminogenic needs, right? If someone is homeless, if someone doesn't have food, all of those things are responsivity pieces, but they also affect the criminogenic needs. So that's kind of where our risk, need, responsivity. And the graph that you see shows our biggest bang for our buck is when we have somebody that has a high need principle or high responsivity principle. That's where we want to focus our resources, because that's where we're going to reduce recidivism the most. That make sense? Okay. So then it gets to 8 core evidence-based practices principles. So we take into account the RNR, the risk, need, responsivity, and then these are the tasks that we do on probation. We're going to always assess people's risk and needs. Find them where they're at, where can we focus our resources. We want to enhance motivation through motivational interviewing, which is it's a tool, it's a skill that we work on with our agents, and it's across a number of different disciplines, but we have a focused way of eliciting their cooperation and what they want to do with their life. We target intervention with the criminogenic needs and responsivity factors. We skill train using cognitive skill programs. We have Thinking for a Change, which is a male and a female group. Mr. Commissioner Berg is familiar with that. We have Thinking for a Change, which is our male and female group that was developed by the National Institute of Corrections. The focus there is on social skills, recognizing risk in thinking, and problem solving. We also have a high-risk female group called Moving On, and that takes into account the same focus, but it's way more geared towards victims and helping them gain confidence to make different choices. We have individual one-on-one interventions with New Directions and with the Carry Guides, and those are on paper and online. So we have a number of different options to weigh, which has been helpful actually with COVID to have more tools online. We also look at positive reinforcement. So for every time I give somebody I don't want to say a critique or like an adjustment or something that I feel they need to work on, I need to back it up with 5 positives. We need to keep building their confidence, right? The next part is to support them in their natural communities. We always have the conversation of they are in our community, they are part of our community, so how do we make them be part of the community, and how do we have them help the community and give back instead of take away? A lot of times I'll give the example of, so would it be okay if I went and sold drugs on the corner, or whatever their crime would be, and they'd be like, well, no. And I say, well, if I'm sitting on this side of the table, does it make me any different? If you don't expect it from me, why would you expect it from yourself and the community? And then they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to be that. Well, then that's something we can work on. We measure the process. We reassess clients annually. There's actually a grid and a recidivism wall where people can see the work that they've done. It's a nice visual, and they're excited, and then they get motivated to want to keep working. And so we go over those assessments with them. We also case plan and then ask them, where do they want to go from here? Where do they see themselves? So we end up starting to be a mentor and kind of a resource provider, more so than the person they don't want to come see. So in probation, we want to have an integrated approach or an integrated model. We want to incorporate our evidence-based practices. And then in our organizational development, we want to have good hiring practices. We want to have people that are on board with this. We have training for our agents. And then we also, there's a number of things we do, but one of the things is our communities of practice, where our agents get together in groups and practice all these skills so that we can practice them with our clients. Does that make sense? And then collaboration. We want to communicate with our community partners. We want to incorporate them. You know, we all work together for the same goals. We need to integrate and use our resources wisely. So 5 main pillars or categories of evidence-based practices is professional alliance. As agents, we're called on to model the pro-social behavior that we want in our clients. They need to see it from somewhere. And so we are the first stop. Motivational interviewing, it's a way for us to effectively engage with an offender to target those behaviors. We need to create buy-in. Everybody knows you're going to do it more if it's your idea than if someone's telling you to do it. Risk assessment, it helps us focus our resources where we can make the most difference, our biggest bang for our buck. Case planning, we do that with our highest risk clients. Sometimes it just needs to be broken down in little tiny steps to help them gain confidence to move forward. Where does the client want to do the work? What is, how do we, it may or may not be a court-ordered condition. Sometimes it might be getting a driver's license. How do you make the steps to get a driver's license? Yet a driver's license is a very empowering thing in outstate Minnesota. So how do you kind of keep them going and building that confidence to make different decisions? And then our cognitive behavior programming. We can do it in a group setting, and then we also have interventions to use in the one-on-one settings. Last but not least, our vision, mission statement, and our principles that we live by. Just for time's sake, I'm going to read our mission. Kanuai County Community Corrections, in partnership with our community, provide services to our offenders and our victims. Our primary goals are to promote public safety, adhere to evidence-based practices, strive for impartial accountability, respect individual potential, and reduce recidivism. And that, in a nutshell, is evidence-based practices.
Thank you, Krystal. Any questions?
I have
Go
a
ahead,
question,
Commissioner
Mr.
Anderson.
Chairman. I was just kind of curious, these people, is this a condition of like court order, or do they have a choice to do this? Are they given the option of, if you go through this program, you get a reduced sentence? Or, because some people probably would say, I'm not going to sit down and talk to anybody about any of my problems, because they don't want to, be told you're a bad person, this is why, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I
is
understand.
it a choice, or is it court ordered, or how is this done?
Evidence-based practice is an environment. It's not just a program. So in every interaction we have with the client, one of these pieces is used or integrated. You might have somebody in a pre-contemplation, if you're in pre-contemplation, I'm not going to be throwing the, okay, let's work on this life thing. I'm going to be just trying to get you on board with just complying with probation. That's where my motivational interviewing is coming in, where I'm saying, I just need you to be okay with us being in the same room.
Yeah.
You have to start at a very small point with some people and just create the buy-in to wanting them to be pro-social, to not keep reoffending.
Okay.
So it's a whole integrated approach. It's not just one piece.
Okay.
And I believe over the next year, we'll have a lot of the different pieces broken down, so you'll see how it's actually the environment that we have in our office, not just one piece.
Okay, so this happens when they're on probation,
Yes.
and then they get let out, and you're required to go visit them and speak with them.
Right, it
Okay.
could be while their case is pending, which is pretrial, which is what Jason will speak about, otherwise when they're court ordered to be on probation. So either way, the court's ordering them to somehow have contact with us, and then that's where we start incorporating, just trying to get them to come along to some pro-social behavior, because obviously they've allegedly or just offended.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of help them right the ship? And that's what probation is about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Krystal, thank you for your report. I was struck by something that you mentioned in there is in working with your clients to find them essentially doing something good, making progress, and acknowledging that. And it just strikes me of the advice that we're always given to catch our kids doing something good as well. And it is that messaging that I think is really important, not just in your field, but for people in general. We just hear too much of the negative. Can you just, for the folks who are watching today and for those of us in this room, can you just give a real brief summary of what cognitive behavioral therapy is, just so people can understand what you're getting at?
Right. The three parts that we really work to focus on is teaching people social skills. How do you interact with people in your community outside of your circles? The other part is recognizing risk in your thinking. There are a number of opportunities leading up to something that you have a choice to make something different. So how do you recognize that risk? How do you recognize that risky feeling and that attitude and belief? And then how do you change it into a new behavior or a new belief? And recognizing it is a really big piece. And the third part is problem solving. We take for granted that problem solving is easy. And there's so many different parts and moving issues with it. So that when we break it all down, people can individualize that. So I believe that would probably be the social skills, the risk in your thinking, and the problem solving. Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before you go, I have one quick question, a clarification question. In your 8 principles, you talked about teaching skills, and I know we do sentence to serve work, and there's skills that are taught there, but I don't think you're talking about those kind of skills, are you, in those 8 principles? You're talking about these cognitive skills that Commissioner Gardner just talked about.
The cognitive restructuring, recognizing where you can make different choices, but also the pro-social modeling, like how do we act in a community? How do we become a part of a community? How do we feel involved? So all of those things are skills, but there are very tangible skills too that you can use at a job that our sentence to serve uses, like building things and
So all
showing
of
up
the
for
above.
work. So, yep, we try to encourage all of those things. It
Thank you.
It is a good incorporation.
Thank you.
So we wanted to start with that, kind of exactly what your question was about this is what we do. You know, all of these pieces that you're talking about, that skill building, the cognitive behavioral programming, all of the different things that we do we start even all the way at the pretrial phase and the pre-sentence investigation phase, so that we can bring all of these things forward all the way through from the first day they show up in our office all the way to the day we discharge them and hopefully get to say success. So it's during the next year, I think we'll get a deeper dive into each of these little tiny pieces of cognitive behavioral programming, behavioral health skills, some of the different things that we do. But we wanted to kind of give you that overview of why we do it to start with. So then the next piece is going to be Allison's going to talk about pre-sentence investigations. If for some reason we run out of time for Jason, we're going to bump him into the next time, just so you know, we'll keep him on deck. So, he'll be right there.
Jason, it's a little like being on deck and they call you back for a pinch hitter. I know you do.
I'll try to talk fast so he's
Well,
not pushed to the next.
It is good questions, though, so we're okay with that. We planned in advance.
Welcome, Allison, and
Good morning.
like Krystal, if you state your name and
Sure.
what you do.
My name is Allison Deal. I'm a probation officer here for Candioi County Community Corrections. And Tammy has asked me to talk a little bit about what it is I do for the county, and that is completing pre-sentence investigations. So there is a Minnesota statute that details the requirements of the pre-sentence investigation, and you'll hear me refer to that as PSI because it is a mouthful. We'll be saying that a lot today. And it describes the areas that should be included within the pre-sentence investigation. So essentially what this statute says is that pre-sentence investigations shall be completed on all felony offenses and may be completed on gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor offenses. So usually, when the court orders a PSI on a lower level offense, there's a victim involved, so a person or a person's property, whereby information about that offense, an impact statement, restitution request would be helpful for the court in determining an appropriate sentence for the offender. So the pre-sentence investigation essentially is a comprehensive report that's intended to assist the court with sentencing offenders. So as you know, this past year has been challenging for everybody with COVID, but ideally this process would start with a face-to-face interview. That over the past year has not been able to happen at all times, but we'll complete those interviews by Zoom if we have to, or by telephone, or whatever we can to make work. I think my slides are out of order, but I wanted to touch a little bit on motivational interviewing. Crystal did talk about this. As she stated, agents are trained in motivational interviewing, which is an evidence-based tool that we use to assist us in obtaining information for the pre-sentence investigation. It's essentially a style of communicating that encourages the offender and promotes change. So I said that the PSI is comprehensive. These are all of the areas that I touch on when I complete a report for the court. So there's demographic data, there's offense information and plea agreements, and the plea agreements we outline in detail because quite often what the offense an offender commits and the offense that they plead to may be two totally different things. The plea agreement may also have other contingencies or agreements such as the amount of jail time an offender would serve or any restitution that may have been agreed upon prior to sentencing. The criminal history of the person can be challenging at times if the offender has an extensive prior record, and also if they have a record outside of the state of Minnesota, we obtain those records as well. Again, when there's an offense that involves a person or a person's property, we attempt to contact the victim. They can provide an impact statement. They can do that in person or by writing if they choose to. And then we would include any restitution if there's restitution in that case. The social history, that would include things like where a person was raised, their family information, where they attended school, their employment history, military, mental health, things like that. The risk and needs, sentencing guidelines, and recommendations to the court. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail here. So, but I think that there's a lot of information here that we collect for a pre-sentence investigation, and I think it's worth mentioning the importance of establishing relationships within the county agencies for this. Oftentimes we can or need to contact the county attorney or the public defender. Maybe we have questions about the plea agreement. We can contact law enforcement to obtain further information about an offense or a search or whatever their involvement was, family services for a variety of reasons. But I think it's important that we build those relationships within our agencies, and that's just essential for completing these investigations. Minnesota sentencing guidelines has been established in 1982, so it's been around for a long time. And essentially what this does is it provides us with consistent and proportionate sentences for all felony offenses within the entire state of Minnesota. So there are two factors that we look at when sentencing someone with using the guidelines, and that would be criminal history of the offender and the severity of the offense that they pled to, not necessarily what they committed, but what they pled to. So first, the severity level of the offense. The Guidelines Commission has assigned a severity level to every felony offense. So for example, I've listed a few. Assault first degree would be a severity level 9, whereas fleeing a peace officer in a motor vehicle would be a 1. So essentially, the higher the severity level, the higher the sentence, the more severe the offense. So these are the areas that we look at when determining an offender's criminal history, and they accrue points in these areas. This is very complicated, but I'm going to briefly try to explain where an offender would obtain points. So custody status. So we ask ourselves, was this offender on supervision, some type of supervision, at the time they committed the current offense for which I'm completing a pre-sentence investigation? So if they are, they're going to get a point for that. We also look at a client's juvenile history. So if somebody commits a felony offense as a juvenile, we can use that to accrue points. They do fall off. We don't use them once they're 25 years and older, but under the age of 25, we do look at their juvenile record. Misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor offenses. So these essentially are what we consider targeted misdemeanors, so person offenses. Assaults, domestics, violations of order for protection. DWIs also count to accrue points. All felony level offenses also will count, provided they're not what we call decayed. So felony offenses that are over 15 years old, we no longer look at. And those, again, are weighted, which I will get into. Non-Minnesota, so anything outside of our jurisdiction. So if somebody commits an offense in South Dakota, for example, what we need to do is take a look at the elements of that crime, and if it does equate to a Minnesota offense, and if they received what would be considered a felony level sentence in Minnesota, we also count those, and they accrue points for that. So once all of the information is gathered, this is the example of a sentencing worksheet, and as you can see, we would enter all of the offenses that would count, and the points are tabulated on the right side. And then that determines the presumptive sentence for that offender. I know it's hard to see, but on one side of the grid would be the severity of the offense that I discussed, and on the top would be the criminal history. And as I explained to some clients, if somebody's coming in on a controlled substance, 5th degree, for example, and they don't have a prior record, they're going to receive a lower sentence than that person committing the same offense that's maybe been to prison 2 or 3 times. So we follow the grid, and it gives us the amount of time in months that the person would serve. The shaded area would be what we call a presumptive commit to prison, and the other part then would be, which is the majority of our clients, which they receive a stayed sentence or placed on probation with conditions. So when an offender receives a sentence in that shaded area, that's a presumptive commit to prison. And if an offender is sent to prison, they serve 2/3 time in prison, and then they come out on supervised release, and which is what we used to term parole. And you may not know this, or maybe you do, but we not only do we supervise probation cases, but these clients that are coming out of prison to serve their supervised release time, we also supervise that population in the community. And lastly, we provide recommendations to the court for the offenders that are placed on supervision. And these recommendations include both punitive and rehabilitative conditions such as jail time, alcohol monitoring, chemical dependency treatment, contact restrictions, for example, if there's a victim involved, or any other conditions that may be specific to an offender's needs. Any questions before I pass it on to Jason?
Any questions?
Just a quick comment, maybe. Severity level 1, fleeing a police officer, bothers me just a bit, because often when someone does that, another accident happens where people get hurt. And so it is a fairly, could be a fairly severe level thing. But would that, the next step where he actually runs over someone would put him into a different level, maybe?
That would be charged out differently, yes. Okay. And I think that's a fair statement. All felonies are serious, and I think what we need to do is we put them in level of severity.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have another question regarding, you had the sentencing guidelines from 1982, and currently, and I think in yesterday's legislative session, it may not have passed. They talk about one of the reasons for considering the legalization of marijuana as a way to level out the disparities in the conviction rates of minorities. I'm trying to understand why the sentencing guidelines don't provide for the equal level of sentencing. Does anybody have a thought or opinion or?
Okay, so sentencing guidelines started in 1982, as Allison talked about. Since then, and understand this was a very, very brief overview of what Allison does with sentencing guidelines. The book that gives us all our rules is about this thick. I mean, and people outside can't see that, but it's about 400 pages, 500 pages. It's very complicated, and if there's a rule of this, there's a rule of that. And if you have two of this sentence and one of that, it's a very complicated process of how we get to sentencing. Where that comes from is the sentencing guidelines started in 1982, and over time, the legislature and then case law has changed those things. So the sentencing guidelines meets every year, and we get a new book every August. And it changes that grid and adjusts it to different things that may have impacted it or different discussions. Part of the sentencing guidelines that we actually took off the presentation is who's on the Sentencing Guidelines Commission, and that includes judges, prosecuting attorneys, probation officers, community members, people that kind of look at all of those different aspects of what's going on in our communities. So that's kind of a long explanation of where sentencing guidelines was. To go back to your original question, the reason that they say that even with all those things, we still have disproportionate sentencing is because when we have arrest rates at higher levels in certain areas, we can see people have more of a criminal history. So even though the sentencing guidelines are based to avoid any type of disproportionate sentencing on individuals because we only go by the offense level and by their criminal history. If they have a criminal history higher than somebody else, it's going to have a disproportionate effect.
So it's more of a disparity in arrest rates than it is in sentencing. Thank you.
Correct.
I would just add one thing to that. As Tammy said, the guidelines are changed every year, but we have to use the book or the guidelines book that was in effect at the time they committed the offense. So my bookshelf is full of guidelines books because quite often offenses such as criminal sexual conduct, they don't come out right away. There's a statute of limitations for that. So I could be looking at a guidelines book from 2007, and if that's how the offender will be sentenced as what the laws were in effect at that time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tammy Jo, I don't know how long Jason's presentation is. We usually try to get 10 minutes a break between these two meetings, so
Right,
that would
so-
only allow you 12 minutes. Can you, I mean, we can go over a little bit, but if,
Okay, and if not, we'll bring him back.
don't ask questions, right?
Well, if you ask questions, we can do the question part at the next time. So,
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Welcome, Jason. State your
morning.
name and your
My name's
position.
Jason Denton. I am a probation officer with Candioi County Community Corrections, and I am where all this starts. Pretrial is not probation. Pretrial is a supervision period for those that are newly in custody and up until their sentencing date.
oh,
There's a lot of confusion for that, that people think while their case is pending that they're actually on supervision for probation. This is pre-trial. These are the people that a lot of times you'll read about in the paper, and we meet with them in jail and do an assessment for them, which is provided to the court and the prosecuting attorneys and the defense attorneys. As we've already talked about, really, keeping people in jail that don't deserve to be there really does cause harm. They're exposed to other people in jail. They're talking about crimes, how to commit them. They are creating a network when they're in custody. So this is it really is a detriment. And Crystal referred to this as well, as we prefer to have the correct people in jail and those that need to be there. Let's see here. Every day, our office receives an email from the jail providing us with those that are newly in custody. It may be, people might be in there for their first offense, they might be in there for their 20th offense. And we have a statute in Minnesota that requires Minnesota pretrial assessment to be done. And to list some of those offenses that are required to meet with include murder, assaults, domestic assault, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, criminal sexual conduct, malicious punishment, arson, burglary, threats of violence, harassment and stalking, and then any felony drug offense. That is not inclusive, but it's an idea of who we are meeting with on a daily basis for those that are newly arrested. The Minnesota pretrial assessment tool is what we use. to review their risk. We look at their criminal history. We look at their employment, any problematic chemical use, their homelessness, the age at first conviction, any bench warrants, and their criminal history again. The Minnesota Pretrial Assessment Tool was established in 2018, replacing the old tool which found some biases with regard to race and those that are arrested. So this tool really is meant to be objective and to predict the risk of people on pretrial. Just to quickly read through this, I'm not a big read through a PowerPoint, but this part I'm gonna. It is, in addition to the judge's experience and discretion, the MinPAT is an objective piece of information that is used to help determine that level of risk. It provides all stakeholders with a validated assessment tool that mitigates implicit bias. The MinPATs are completed on a daily basis by our office and are required for certain offenses, which I have listed. And the MinPAT helps us assess the risk and also helps us ensure the safety of victims and the public. So on pretrial, which is where a lot of this begins, it has to matter. I've been in the criminal justice field for 29 years, 8 years at Prairie Lakes Detention Center, youth programs, and then the remainder of my time here working with these individuals, the pretrial people, and I still love these people. I love working with them. They are, a lot of times at their worst, they are addicted to street drugs, alcohol, prescription meds, they're unemployed, they're away from their family, they're considered homeless, they have mental health issues. When these people come out, we have to make this matter. Pretrial has to matter to you, it has to matter to me, it has to matter to the prosecution, it has to matter to the defense, it has to matter to their families, and most of all, it has to matter to those people that we are helping move forward. The ultimate goal, and simply put, while on pretrial, we want these individuals to appear for court appearances. We want them to remain law-abiding, and we want to ensure the safety of the public and the victims. Now, this is really the nuts and bolts of it. These are easy. The rest of our jobs and working with these people and getting them to a better place is where the work really begins. Looking at this slide, I used this slide for another presentation, and just quickly going across the top. On pretrial and on probation, we're dealing with people that don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't know whether they want to change. When they decide they do want to change, the second picture there, what do? There's so many directions they can go. I don't know what to do. I don't know when to do it. I don't know who to talk to. The third picture is, okay, I've decided to change, but now where do I start? And then as they start and as they move through things, the last picture is, where do I go for help? And they come to us, and they come to social services. So it's a process that we really do hope they make some changes. We want to work with the defendants for rehabilitation by creating a voluntary case plan, which I'll go over here in a little bit. We want to help them develop strategies for success while using EBP programming where appropriate, and Krystal referred to some of those skills that we teach. We want to allow them to work on some chosen criminogenic needs, some areas of their life that they really want to work on that they maybe don't know about. And we use the motivational interviewing that Allison referred to as well. And we want those accomplishments and achievements to be reported to the court and their attorneys, meaning pretrial matters. So when they get to sentencing, they can give their attorney and the judge and the prosecuting attorney some information. So when I am meeting with individuals on medium and high risk on pretrial, I go over what's called a voluntary case plan. This truly is voluntary. We have to remember that on pretrial, these people are innocent. And I want to work with them at their level and meet them where they want to be and what they want to improve on. And as you'll see, I'll just give this to them, really have them read it over and go through it. On the top boxes are the criminogenic needs. For pretrial, I worded them a little bit different because I don't have a true full assessment like the LSCMI that Krystal mentioned. So it's very unlikely that I'm going to have somebody come into my office and say, I'd really want to work on my pro-criminal attitude and orientation. So I simply changed that to just maintaining a positive attitude. Just to put a less threatening spin on it, it's not as threatening once they're on probation because they've done the assessment and they're referred to those walls and those areas of need when they're done with the assessment. And again, I want to meet these individuals where they want to start. If they want to say, I want to call my grandma, I'll start there. That's ultimately not where we're going to go, but I want to start building some rapport and getting some accomplishments for these people. As you'll see on the bottom there, there's action steps. If somebody wants to set up a chemical use assessment, the action steps, I will ask them, what are you going to do? Look up the number, make the phone call, set an appointment. Who do you talk to next? Very simple things that I can revisit at the next appointment to show them that, hey, you are accomplishing some things. Hey, you still are working on a few things. And these will be ongoing. So these are the reports that they can bring to their attorney and show the things that they've accomplished while they're on pretrial. Just to touch a little bit on the levels of risk and what the reporting requirements are while they're on pretrial. The low risk, we have administrative low risk and just regular low risk. These people will remain open with our offices. These are the people that we don't want to have a lot of contact with. If they need help, absolutely, we'll help them with whatever they need. But as a rule, if they're doing well, we kind of want to just let the judicial process play through and allow them to take care of their case while on pretrial. They will be required, however, to report any changes of work, phone, address, and to contact us immediately with any changes. These are just a lot of times I'll get a call from an attorney, a defense attorney saying, hey, do you know where my client is at? Do you have a new phone number? Do you have an address? So it just helps us stay in touch. They will be required to submit the random testing, which will be on demand from our office. So when we think or may hear some rumblings about them having some issues, we'll call them in ourselves. Medium and high risk is a little more intensive, if you will. In addition to what I said for the low risk, these people will be calling in for random testing on a daily basis. They will be required to report up to weekly or monthly to determined by the probation officer. Excuse me. And these medium and high risk people will be allowed and given the opportunity to participate in the case plan that I referred to a couple slides ago. The hope for pretrial clients, and you could put the hope for probation, you could put the hope for anybody we're working with here, but it's our hope that life-changing decisions are made during the pretrial supervision through collaboration with our pretrial agent and the resources that Candioi County is so fortunate to have. And I truly believe that. We get an email today with the resources from social services. I think it was 12 or 13 pages long, and it is unbelievable the opportunity that people have for change here in Candioi County. With that said, I tell my clients all the time, I said, I can offer you almost any kind of service you need in this county if you are willing to use it and take advantage of it. And we work with them. They're going to have their slip-ups, and we have those resources to refer these people back to. And you are well aware of the resources we have from mental health to chemical health to housing. It's across the board. So we are fortunate. There are a lot of counties that do not have that for the people that they're trying to help. Before questions, if you have any, I'm sure you will, I will leave my business card there. If you have any questions with pretrial, my direct number's on there. Just give me a call anytime. So,
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jason? All right. Well, I would just thank all of you for coming in here today. I was struck, Jason, am struck, I should say, by the, particularly on the low-risk people, how you treat them as fellow human beings rather than that, high-risk offender that we're going to deal with in harsh ways, because I think the evidence is showing that is more effective than the stick approach. And
absolutely.
So,
and you'll see it even on the high-risk people. You can, the public and people that don't work with these individuals every day, I don't care if I tell my people, I don't care if it's your 25th time through here or your first. My hope and our hope is that's your last. So even when the high-risk people walk into our offices, they're people first. And they're always able to change. We hope that they do. As we well know, some don't, but the higher risk people are more likely not to. But again, we have those resources to give them each time.
Thank you all for the work you do, and thanks for coming in today. Tammy Jo, do you have any closing comments?
Nope, the only thing I have is I did hand out our quarterly statistics that are part of the process here. I'll review those each time that we go through, just to kind of give you an idea of how many different people that we do have coming through our office at different times. And so other than that, yeah, that should be it. We'll see you, we'll bring more information in a couple weeks.
Thank you very much. Kansas County Services, Health and Human Services Committee is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you so much, that was great.